Mid-City Neighborhood Organization. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I wanted to recognize some of our other Mid-City Neighborhood Organization board members, Chris Bloom and Jordan Sachs, and Mary Kelly Swafford is working the table in the hall. Again, thank you. If you're from the Mid-City community, Mid-City Neighborhood Organization for this Easton High School, the cafeteria on October 14th. And we're having the neighborhood porch crawl, which is adult Halloween trick-or-treat on Friday, October 18th in the neighborhood. We are selling tickets. We will also have Mid-City flags available, Mid-City magnets, Mid-City hats, things like that. Again, thank you so much for coming out this evening. I wanted to be sure and introduce our moderators for this evening. I wanted to let you know that they are here as volunteers as well in the community to getting to know their candidates for elected office. On my left is New Orleans native Megan Braden Perry. She is an author of Crescent City Snow, The Ultimate Guide to New Orleans Snowball Stands, and Alan the Alligator Counts Through New Orleans, a New Orleans Kids Counting book. She is a 2019 Jack Jones Literary Art Retreat Fellow, an overnight news writer and copy editor and freelance journalist. Previously, she was a staff reporter for NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune, and Gambit. Freelance bylines of hers include Essence Magazine, Jezebel Magazine, New York. Also here this evening is Tim Morris. Morris is a 40-year journalism veteran with a career that includes the last 24 years with NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. He's a former columnist in the Times-Picayune opinion section. Morris was project editor for Oceans of Trouble, Are the World's Fisheries Doomed?, an 8-part series that won the newspaper its first Pulitzer Prize in 1997. He was instrumental in the conception, planning, and production of Louisiana Incarcerated, How We Built the World's Prison Capital, an 8-part series in 2012 that received a prestigious Sydney Award in 2013 for his role as executive producer for Louisiana Purchased, a joint project with WVUE Fox 8 that looked at state campaign financing. Please welcome our moderators. Now we have 4 candidates running for office for District 94 in Mid-City. All of the candidates were invited, and tonight we get to hear from Dr. Tammy Savoie and Kirk Williamson. And this was usually the part where I was going to introduce them to applause, so welcome them to the stage. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to the evening's moderators. So thank you so much.
And welcome to everyone from us as well. And we want to thank the candidates. Just like you know, the 2 seats, we may end up having some candidates who are on a little bit later. We're going to try to figure out the best way to work them in without any disruption. So, looking at the most wise in the room, I've been asked to explain the rules of how we're going to operate tonight. So the first part of it is that in that introduction is to specifically talk about some legislation, either a package or a bill that you want to prioritize, that you also think you can get passed in the coming session to benefit the district, the city, and its region. So other than that, you will also have, we will go through the topics, and you will each have 1 minute to answer the question. And if one of the candidates is mentioned by another candidate and you wish to respond and rebut something that's said more directly, you'll have 30 seconds to do that. You probably noticed definitely throw it, but the other part of this is to be that if you want to interject yourself and come back, maybe you've already used your time, or someone has said something that you want to come back, you can throw the flag and you get an extra minute to expound on that. So trying to think whether there was just other things that I think I've covered all that, and then we will have 2-minute closing remarks. So also to help you keep up with the 1 minute without constantly looking at your phone, Patrick Armstrong will be sitting there in the front row, and I've said, you will by the end of the night not like Patrick, but he's really a good guy, and he's here just to help you. So he's gonna, when he has the green card, that means that you started, you're doing fine. When he holds up the yellow card, you have 10 seconds left. When he holds up the red card, your time has expired. And we try to be gracious. And you know that at least you complete the sentence, but maybe when the yellow card comes up, start thinking about closing out your remarks. And we know in the beginning that it'll take a little bit to how quick it is or how long it is. So all the way across the board for the candidates, there was a random drawing of the order rather than going alphabetically or some other way. So the drawing, Ms. Savoie is first there at the far left, and then Kirk Williamson. So we'll start with your 2-minute opening statement, and especially again, like I said, focusing on some legislation that you think is really important to your district that you think you can also get passed, and how.
So do you want an introduction first, and then
Yes.
and then also?
Well,
Testing. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tammy Savoie, and so a little bit about me. I am from this area. I'm a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and a clinical psychologist by training. And so really, to get into it real quickly, I have 3 buckets that I really want to concentrate on. That is our local issues, and that's infrastructure, insurance, roads and bridges, safety, social issues, which include labor standards and things of that nature, our healthcare, our education system, criminal justice reform. And then finally, the 3rd bucket is threats to our democracy, and that is making sure we have fair districts, making sure that we don't have voter suppression, and taking care of our environment and addressing climate change and sea level rise. So those are the things that I'm most concerned about and I'm going to tackle. I think in terms of legislation, municipal control, as far as what we can do for Mid-City and New Orleans, minimum wage and labor relations law. So we can set, we can talk about the pay gap, we can talk about making sure we have fair wages and things like that. So I think the municipal control over labor standards would be my top legislative issue, and I think we can pass that this year with the right legislators. So I would ask you that you support me on October 12th, and that you go out there and vote for me. I'm number 115 on the ballot. So thank you very much.
So I really enjoyed our time in Mid-City. We're residents of Lakeview now. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a naval officer, and I'm a business owner. And I tell people about my background. It's something I've recently started talking about. But look, I was raised by a single mother who, in a trailer park, who we had to hear her cry at night, wondering how she was going to pay the bills. And I visited my father in prison on Christmas, and I was there on deployment when men and women gave their lives for their country. So, you know, life hasn't always been that easy for me, but I never let my past to define my future. And in many ways, that does remind me of Louisiana. Look, we've been in rough shape the last several years. You don't look any further than the fact that, U.S. News and World Report has rated us 50th out of 50 for 3 out of the last 4 years. We are in and out of recessions the last 4 years, while the rest of the country is in some of the most economically booming times in our nation's history, while at the same time, we've lost almost 67,000 people from the state of Louisiana. Statistically, we are going in the wrong direction, but I fundamentally don't believe that our past has to define our future. So what does that better future look like? Legislatively, I would like to focus on taxes. Right now, we have been increasing taxes on the poorest people in this state to pay for the largest budgets in our state's history. It's passed taxes on wine, taxes on parking lots, taxes on high school football games, and taxes on Girl Scout cookies. There's actually now increased taxes on when you transfer a kidney. They got rid of those deductions. It's getting out of control, and it's hitting the pocketbooks of hardworking men and women in our state. Number 2, we've got to focus on cutting car insurance rates. Right now, Louisiana pays the highest auto rates in the country. It equates to almost $1,200 more per person in the state of Louisiana when you compare it to the rest of the states in this country. That is real money in real people's pockets. That is a retirement account. That is a kid's college savings account. God forbid you take your family to Gulf Shores and have good times. The hardworking men and women of this state. I'm out of time, and 2 minutes right on it. So thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
Great job, y'all. All right, so first we're just going to start with healthcare. That's just easy. Y'all can just volley back and forth. First question, of course, for Tammy. Well, for both of y'all, but you know what I mean. Access to mental health services is critical for our community health. How do we get more state funding for mental health services in New Orleans and Louisiana?
So with the Medicaid expansion, Governor Edwards went a long way to make sure that everybody has coverage, and so right now we still have about 11% of people that aren't covered with medical care at all. So what we really need to do is continue with that Medicaid expansion and making sure that people have access. So in New Orleans, we have enough mental health providers. Across the state, we do not. So the question in New Orleans is, how do we get people to the mental health providers, insurance or access to low or free mental health services? And that is one, capturing that population that needs mental health. And how do we do that? Because our homeless population and our really low income people are the folks that don't have mental health care. And those are the folks that need it most desperately. So in terms of getting funds, we can funnel this through our healthcare system dollars that come through the state and through the city. But we really need to focus on making sure everybody has healthcare across the board so that we can get the referrals to the mental health, because a lot of people will not go to mental health first. They need to be referred there or get there through another avenue. Well, I'm out of time. I was going to go through the state and probably get it.
So far be it for me to try and talk about mental health with the doc, but the question kind of does revolve around funding and how do we increase that funding? Well, I'm a business owner and I finally understand what numbers and books look like. Right now in the state of Louisiana, we are dedicating 93% of our budget, either constitutionally protected or statutorily dedicated. We can only touch 7% of our budget. So every so often, in the last couple of years, you hear about politicians saying, look, we're out of money, we're gonna have to increase taxes. Well, that's because we can only touch 7% of our budget. So how do we free that up? There's a couple of different ways. One, we start electing people who will absolutely go in and statutorily undedicate funding. A lot of that's good and noble things, but everything needs to be put back into a general fund budget and funded out of that general fund budget. Two, we have got to have a constitutional convention in the state of Louisiana. If we are not talking about a constitutional convention, anybody running for office right now, then we are kidding ourselves, because we are just going to paint ourselves, continue to paint ourselves into a corner where we still only can touch 7% of our budget. I am in favor of freeing up that other 93% and funding the priorities that affect hardworking men and women of the state, to include mental health services. Thank you.
Thank you. Louisiana has high rates of maternal mortality, especially for women of color, and many obstacles for women seeking access to health care. How do we improve women's health care in New Orleans and Louisiana?
So in response, first of all, when we free up that money, we have to dedicate it to mental health and health care. For maternal mortality, it's a huge problem in the city. And really what we need is universal prenatal care for all women. So from conception until she gives birth, until a year after the birth, women need health care. And the question is, well, how do we get that? How do we pay for that? So every time, and we also, in addition, and this goes along with this whole thing, in addition to high maternal mortality rates, we also have high preterm baby rates and low birth baby weights. Every time a baby is born as a preemie, it costs the state about $49,000 to $55,000 the first $2,000 to $5,000 that first year. So what we can do, we have an enormous rate, 10 to 20% of our babies are born this way. If we took those savings, if we invested that on the front end with prenatal care, we would pay 2 to 3 times over what it costs for prenatal care for every woman in this state. That's how we can reduce the maternal mortality rate. Immediately start with prenatal care from the date of conception.
Yeah, so when you look at across, and while in New Orleans there are a lot of issues, I think fundamentally, a lot of the numbers that we see for women not having access to care, or whether that be child mortality rates being as high as they are, the overwhelming majority of those events occur in rural areas, because they're having to drive 100 miles to access care, or even more. And in some cases, you look up at Northeast Louisiana, where I'm originally from, it's the poorest area, or one of the poorest areas in the country, where people barely have housing and much less health care. And so how do we restructure that to allow those individuals to access care? One, with a nurse, they perform some of the jobs and roles of a doctor. For example, why does a doctor have to sign off on a chart when they just come in once a week on a Friday and sign off on charts when the nurses are doing the regular jobs? I would like to see prices being driven down and a market reform by allowing nurses to be able to come in and perform some of the skills that a doctor could do just simply on signing off on a chart. That drives up costs, and those are things that I would like to see to increase, especially in rural areas, care in those rural areas.
All right, thank y'all. Last one for healthcare. How do we build on Medicaid expansion to make sure everyone who needs
who are not covered right now? And that's because they're in this pocket, they make too much to get Medicaid, and they make too little basically to go out and purchase a decent healthcare program. So what we really need to do is help families out to the extent that we can cover, especially if we go to a public option choice where they can choose a public option and pay for a healthcare plan in the same vein that we can go out and buy Medicare. So we need to expand. We have, some kind of option for them to go out and buy an affordable healthcare plan. If you're making just enough to cover your expenses and not enough to go out and get a healthcare plan, then you're in a lot of trouble if you get ill. So we really need to do this for families so they do not fall into a medical bankruptcy, which would put them, then they could afford it because they'll be so poor they'll, qualify for Medicaid. So what we have to do is just expand those limits and provide a public option.
Premise of the question. Look, fundamentally, I don't think we should be building on the Medicaid expansion. I know that's kind of tough to hear, but right now we know for a fact that in the state of Louisiana, there has been between $80 and $120 million in waste, fraud, and abuse, according to the Advocate reported it last year. $80 to $120 million. There are people today who are making over $100,000 who are on this Medicaid expansion program. 33,000 people were kicked off that program last year because they made too much money. The real problem with this program right now is that, and I firmly believe that this governor, his Department of Health and his Department of Revenue, with one Department of Revenue share the financial information of individuals with Department of Health, and Department of Health is not communicating with the Department of Revenue. $80 to $120 million in waste, fraud, and abuse. It is one of the biggest, most egregious waste, fraud, and abuse programs in the state of Louisiana's history, and it is a massive problem. So before we can even talk about expanding anything that we've done recently, we have got to start addressing that massive hole where your tax dollars are just getting thrown into paying for people who do not or should not be on that program. Thank you.
I'd like to.
Yeah, there's one.
You gonna throw your flag on?
I'm gonna throw my flag up for this because this is the Medicaid expansion program has been one of the biggest success stories in the governor's tenure. First of all, an independent study by Louisiana State University shows that it has been a win-win for Louisiana. We have insured almost 600,000 or 500,000 people that did not have medical insurance now have medical insurance. So this has been a boom. It also has been an influx for the economy because we have federal dollars that have come in too. In addition, it has created medical, and when you have money, when you have care, you can get better. And people that can go get medical care and they're well, they can go back and get jobs. So it has been a catalyst to get the economy going. This has been a positive in every way, shape, and form for Louisiana, and we have to expand on it. If there has been abuse, we caught it. And there's not a program that's gonna run without abuse, without some mismanagement, but overall, this has been a major success. And healthcare should be there. If you're working, you deserve to have, everybody deserves to have healthcare, but the idea that this has not been successful, I totally disagree with that. This has been a wonderful thing for Louisiana.
Thank you. One thing, one thing I didn't make clear, and we can, is that you only get the one flag, so you've used your challenge.
No, she didn't know that. This is actually appreciated to actually be able to have a debate. I fundamentally do agree with
Okay,
that.
so we'll give you, we're gonna give a minute, let's give a minute. Response.
Yeah, this is one of the best things, ladies and gentlemen. I do not consider $120 million of waste, fraud, and abuse a good thing. I just don't, and I do disagree with that. And I know for a fact that the Department of Revenue and the Department of Health, who have been called to testify before the Louisiana State Legislature, is not in any way communicating with one another. As a matter of fact, Julie Stokes out of Kenner, who held an actual committee meeting to get them to communicate. They are not, and this continues. So until this gets resolved, there
more flag as long as we have two more candidates, because I didn't explain that at the beginning. And then also I wanted to point out that the gentleman over there, Robert Morris, who I've noted is from the better looking, smarter half of the Morris family, with Uptown and Mid-City Messenger, is live streaming this and is also videoing it. So, but just what I would encourage you is that he gets these up on the website pretty quickly, so you can, with people who couldn't make it tonight, you can share this and they get to see the whole thing. And it's not behind a paywall the last time I checked.
That's right.
So that's a positive. So, we're gonna move on now to housing and preservation. And, one of the things that people are talking about, quite vociferously these days is the sudden rise in property taxes, especially in Orleans. And the issue being that families who lived in homes for generations now suddenly see their taxes going way up without any change in their circumstances. You also have the culture bearers. A lot of people in New Orleans who have been a part of what makes New Orleans what it is are being forced to relocate because they can no longer afford this. Now, the city council are board and holding them neutral, but the question is, in the legislature, is there something that lawmakers should be looking at to protect homeowners from sudden drastic changes in their property taxes? We'll start with Kirk.
And thank you for the question, because this is probably one of the most important issues in this race. And you cannot drive up and down Canal or in Mid-City or in Lakeview or even in Bucktown or any of these other places or Lakeville or Lake Vista without seeing for sale signs going up. They're going up everywhere because, to your point, people cannot afford to live here. And it's for multiple reasons. To push the homestead tax exemption back down to the local level. There is no reason why in the state of Louisiana that everybody gets the same $75,000 homestead tax exemption across the board. A $75,000 homestead tax exemption in Orleans Parish disproportionately allows you to, it's less than, say, a home in Ouachita Parish, where a $75,000 home is a mansion and would basically not allow you to pay property taxes at all. I fundamentally believe that we need to push the homestead tax exemption down to the local level, and in times when property tax assessments increase the way that they have, it would allow the citizens the flexibility to go to their council people and fight to increase that homestead tax exemption so that it can help offset the rise in property taxes.
So I would agree with Kirk on that. We need to raise the homestead exemption. So if we, like I said in my opening statement, we need to move these issues to municipal control, and that's what we have to do. In the event that we can't do that, then we really need to raise the homestead exemption in Baton Rouge, and we have to go there and fight for that and raise it to 175 or whatever we can get it to, because right now the homestead exemption is not really working for the people of New Orleans, and that's the same thing. Go on with the minimum wage and labor standards and things like that. We just really have to have control over the zoning in our own towns, in our own cities and neighborhoods, and the homestead exemption. So that's one of the things that we can do at the state legislative level.
So properties in District 94, a lot of them have been able to be preserved and upgraded through historic tax credits and other programs like that. So are there things when you go to Baton Rouge, whether it be, continuing, expanding historic tax credits or other sort of, go zone kind of things, are there things that you would look at for the district specifically that you think would help homeowners to, improve their properties and hang on to the homes that they have?
Sure. The historic tax credit will expire or sunset 2021. Of course, we need to renew that because that's very important for our homes here in Louisiana and in New Orleans in particular, and expand them out. So, in addition, we have a lot of doubles here, a lot of so any kind of exemption or incentives that we can keep the property values at a level that they can afford it, and keep them in the city because we don't want to lose them. And then for affordable housing, it's such a problem. We have a lot of blighted or a lot of empty, this is what I talked to the housing people not too long ago, but we have a lot of empty school lots or abandoned parking lots basically that the city owns that we can bid on in the city, that we can own it and help with affordable housing basically, build affordable housing. So we also have to take care of about making sure that we don't have people come in, buy up our properties, and then rent them out for Airbnb, and it becomes too expensive for our locals to stay here. So we have to do something with that too.
Thank you. Look, I say this as somebody who does this for a living. I develop properties, and we have in the past utilized historic tax credits, and we're utilizing opportunity zones, which I fundamentally believe is a game changer for allowing people to reinvest back into their own neighborhoods. That was brought down actually by the federal tax legislation that was passed about 2 years ago. It's a game changer for the city, and I think that's something that we should look at and working with our federal partners to expand because it really can help individuals in their own neighborhoods. That's on the federal level. look, to the point about this tax credit or this tax deduction and all these things. Look, the government doesn't have a responsibility in picking and choosing winners in the marketplace. It should. We should focus on creating a fair and streamlined tax code that everybody knows what they're paying and how they're going to pay for it. We should not be at the whims of fluctuations like we've seen. And I think that when we start to kind of meander privately and it's driving up costs, the government should not be in the role of picking and choosing winners and picking and choosing tax credits. We need to broaden our tax credits so that everybody has a buy-in to their government, so that more people will be, have basically go to their government and say, look, I'm bought in, I'm paying a little bit, this is what we need to do. We should stop picking and choosing winners in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. Another issue is I have, the Mayor Cantrell had asked all the legislative candidates to sign her fair share pledge. Have either of you signed it?
I have not done.
Yes,
Industry, which does provide jobs and clearly is an economic generator, although a lot of people argue they're low-income jobs. Is the city getting its fair share, and should it be up to what happens in Baton Rouge to determine what New Orleans gets and doesn't get?
It's a great question, and look, at the end of the day, the tourism industry is an economic engine, if not the economic engine for the city of New Orleans. For us to continue to go to them and say we need more and more of your dollars, that they increase in our property taxes, while at the same time they went to the state and said we're out of money. It was disingenuous. We need to allow those companies that are successful, that are producing jobs. And I kind of fundamentally disagree. Not all of those are low-paying jobs. Look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of jobs in the tourism industry that pay very well. As a matter of fact, it has spurred a lot of private businesses, whether that's doing haunted ghost tours and all these other things. I mean, people have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I don't think that we should be killing the economic engine in the city. But I'll conclude this because I know I'm almost out of time. That was a deal that was worked out by the tourism industry and the mayor, so I do applaud that effort, that at least they got to the table and did work out those issues. So I do applaud them in that regard.
I think the tourist industry needs to do more for New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. New Orleans contributes 30% of Louisiana's budget. So the idea that we can just be abandoned is totally false. So if it weren't for New Orleans, the rest of Louisiana would not be doing as well as it's doing. So the rest of Louisiana really depends on New Orleans. And so, how New Orleans goes, there goes the rest of the state. So I do not believe we're getting our fair share. The tourist industry comes in, they have, minimum wage paying jobs. And we refuse, the Baton Rouge refuses to raise the minimum wage. Service sector jobs or the primary jobs, the primary employers in New Orleans and Metairie. And those are low-paying jobs. They don't have good benefits, and they keep people in poverty. And we can't get ahead. So I believe that the tourist industry, as much as they make, all that money goes, we put in, what the tourist industry pulls out, and using our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our emergency services, we need that money back so we can invest in our school systems, in our emergency systems, and our roads and our infrastructure as well. They need to contribute more than what they're doing. They're making a bundle off of us.
All right, thank y'all. Next question. The Ann E. Casey Kids Count ranks Louisiana as 49th in our quality of life ranking for specific items on your platform that will improve the quality of life for children. And how would you implement them? How much will it cost? Where, why, how? What you gonna do for the kids? And you get 2 minutes also, I'm sorry, to answer each of these.
Okay, so yes, okay, so there is one of the most important things we can do as a state is fund early childhood education. It would cost, at a bare minimum, about $80 million every single year, and that can be done last year. This is a big disagreement I have, quite frankly, with the governor, who's running for re-election, who's going around telling people that he's putting people over politics, and that is just not the case, ladies and gentlemen. We had an opportunity this last legislative session to fully fund early childhood education at $80 million. Instead, he decided to give teacher pay raises at $1,000. Look, teachers need pay raises. At $1,000, which equates, after taxes, basically equates to about a cup of coffee per day. just so that he could appease the educators unions so that they would turn around and vote for him in this next election. He put politics above people, and it was not right. And not just people, but children. Early childhood education should have been funded not only at the $80 million level, but even more. And the way that we're going to fund these programs isn't just through wishful thinking and people running for office coming out making a bunch of promises. There's a tangible way that we're going to do this, and it's through the Constitutional Convention. We have got to free up that 93% of the money in our budget to start to fund the programs that are important to us today, not the priorities of 1974, the last time our Constitution was written by Edwin Edwards, by the way. We are still living under his rules and his budget, and we have continued to dedicate more money and more money. And I'll give you a great example. Right now, we are funding at a tune of almost $5 million annually the boll weevil eradication program. Who in this room knows what a boll weevil is? Some, right. Now, the last time a boll weevil has been in the state of Louisiana has been almost 20 years ago. But yet we're still funding that program. So that's $5 million right there that we could put towards early childhood education. This isn't some kind of fancy dream. Can be a reality. We just need leaders to step up to the plate who can actually get this done. And it is, look, if we fund early childhood education, we're talking about reductions in crime. We're talking, in so many other benefits to our society that we could also do cost savings, that we could reinvest into early childhood education, and it just continues on and on. So I'm out of time, but that's hopefully the who, what, when, where, and why of your question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as of Louisiana, it's tough for a lot of kids. So we have the highest rate of childhood poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood food scarcity. Our education system is at the bottom. I do not believe that we're going to raise children up by cutting teacher pay anymore. We're at the bottom for teacher pay. And so I applaud the governor for giving them their raise. The way that we can fund childhood education is, like I was saying before, we have to cut our healthcare costs, particularly for preemie babies and low birth weight babies. This is costing us a fortune. So we have 10% weight, a healthy full-term baby saves us $40,000, okay? That's on the low end. Multiply that by the 20,000 or so babies that are born in that way, and we have enough money to fund childhood education 2 times over, okay? And we save that from the minute the mom, from 9 months after we start funding prenatal care and making sure, and that includes transportation for mothers to get there. So we have to have a very comprehensive program. But that alone will fund a preterm baby that is born. Not only needs early education, but they have disabilities throughout their life. And we have this cascading effect. So we pay, $55,000, $55,000 in healthcare costs their first year of life. Their second year of life and their third year of life, it's going to cost maybe not that much, but it's a few more $1,000, $20,000. And this just adds, they get to school, they're behind, and they have special needs as they go forward. So this cascades. We can solve so many problems by being healthy throughout their delivery and throughout the first couple of years in life and get them off to a good start. We can save and we can have a healthier population. That's how we can do that. It's not that hard. We just have priorities. We have to prioritize. That's what we have to do.
Thank you both. And Kirk, for the years I've been wondering where the boll weevils were, and now I know. So they're ready.
They're not Louisiana.
right, not here. Thank you so much. Next question. The industrial tax exemption, ITEP, but has been heavily criticized for giving away too much while Louisiana gets too little in return, especially in comparison to states like Texas and Georgia. How will you ensure ITEP works for Louisiana taxpayers, and how does the state get to a place where we can encourage economic development without giving away so many tax breaks and subsidies?
Okay. So I'll go first on this one. And so the ITEP program is, it's a good program in conception, in theory. And of course, all states really, do incentives to get businesses to come in. And so we want to do that, but we have taken this to a different level. So we are giving away the state at, 80% tax cuts or tax breaks to industries that come in and promise jobs and then don't give us jobs, and that's all documented, and then come in also and destroy our environment. So what the governor did this last legislative session was he did an executive order giving back municipal control over tax exemptions. So this was a good thing. So New Orleans, what our city was, say, okay, industry, you want to come into New Orleans, we want you here, but this is what we're going to do. If you come to New Orleans, you have to start your industry in one of the distressed areas of our city. And you have to pay our workers $18 an hour. And you have to bring in so many jobs. These are the kind of incentives that we need to make sure that industry comes in, you know, to our city. People want to come here and work, but also to give back so that it is a fair exchange. That's what we need.
So I'll politely disagree with this. I think that at the end of the day, when we pushed the ITEP program back down to the local level, it was an overreach by this governor and that executive order. And by that I mean this. Look, right now, if you're a taxing entity in any parish across the state, whether you're a school board, dog catcher, anybody, you get to have a say-so in multi-billion-dollar investments in this state. We need, while there was legislation that I would have supported, like this last session, that does keep the ITEP program down on the local level, but it says, look, whether you're a mayor or city council, whether you're a parish president or a parish council, that's who needs to be making these decisions. And I agree with that. Look, I don't want my dog catcher telling ExxonMobil that all of a sudden you can't bring in $10 billion in investment that does create the highest paying jobs in the state of Louisiana. I fundamentally also disagree with the city council and what they've done recently, because just for the very reasons that Tammy had just pointed out. Look, by saying that you have got to locate, let's say, a oil refinery who basically benefits from this program to a distressed neighborhood, who wants an oil refinery in the lower Ninth Ward right now? They have essentially locked that to our community in investments that would generate revenue that would help us build a better police force and build better streets. But we've locked business out. We are anti-business in this city, and we need to get to the point to where we are encouraging investment, not discouraging it. Thank you.
I need to rebut.
You did, yeah. That definitely said her.
Yeah. We don't want an oil refinery in Tremay or any of the other distressed cities. But what we do want is industry that will grow our cities and grow our neighborhoods and things like that. So I have no problem with the local entities deciding, you know, where we want industry and what we want them to do. And we wouldn't have an oil refinery, right? That'd be out in the Gulf. But you know, the idea of local control is so important that we get to control when people come in here and say they're going to provide jobs for us and then don't, and then destroy our environment as well. We get to have a say in that, and we get to stop that. We have not had any control over that in the past however many decades to when this started in '84 or something like that. Yes, so I'm okay.
Infrastructure to, you know, actually these are sexy topics, I think, in the New Orleans area, especially with infrastructure. And that would be that some of you may have heard that we flood occasionally here when it rains. And clearly that's a local responsibility. But are there things that a representative of this district would be doing, thinking about doing, or pushing for in Baton Rouge that would help the city and Jefferson Parish as well, the region, to deal with the sinking levees, the federal issues, and other things about keeping the bad water out and the good water in?
Yeah, absolutely, and great question. And this is an issue that have obviously affected both Mid-City and Lakeview, large portions of District 94 in the last couple of years. Look, this is an issue where I fundamentally agree with your incumbent representative right now. After those two flooding events, she basically, the only thing she did for us was to create a study to understand the management structure of sewage and water board. That was literally like studying the size of the hole in the Titanic after it had already sunk. What's the point? We know that the sewage and water board is dysfunctional and not providing the services that we demand as citizens. So what do we do about that? I would actually be interested in exploring the idea of privatizing sewage and water board. At this point right now, it is actually it was created by the state of Louisiana in the 1800s, and the state of Louisiana, and as a representative, would have the ability to bring that back under state control temporarily until we can find a buyer. Right now, the sewage and water board generates about $250 million annually in revenue. If you were to sell the sewage and water board, that equates to about almost $1 billion in sales. I would be in favor of this, saying, look, we'll sell sewage and water board to Simmons or some of these other large utility companies across the country that is very common, and for $750 million, but you digitize our water meters as part of the sale. All the other services that are provided in the city are privatized. Electricity, internet, cell phones, everything. My trash gets picked up and so does my recycle. The only thing that does not work is sewage and water board, and they need to be either threatened or we need to go and privatize the sewage and water board to get better maintenance and better services.
So I would take it, that's one thing we have to make sure we take care of, our sewage and water board, our pumps and all of that. But we have a larger issue here, and that is sea level rise, global climate change, global warming, right at our doorstep, and we are not doing that. And so what I propose is that we take a look at our master coastal plan and start implementing that and making sure that we're funding those projects, partner with our federal representatives and our sister states, and go to the federal government and say, coastal survival is really important. This is a priority, more so than a border wall or any of the other things that, we might be wasting money on. So we really need to take care of our environment and make sure that we are adapting the changes that is going to come within the next 2 decades if we do not do something right now. So that's the way I would go. It's just like, yes, we have to take care of our local issues, but look, if we don't do something about the major global trend in the environment and our weather and the climate, we're in for a lot of trouble.
So this is another kind of complex question because it deals with a lot of different government entities, which are complex almost by definition. And that would be concerns in different neighborhoods about the trains. Now we're blessed in and out, but the trains, both locally and those that are federally mandated, the questions are about traffic concerns about in some places with the trains, others more specifically about safety and trains that are parked certain places, trains that come through our neighborhoods with we don't know what all is in there, and concerns about that. So again, this is a thing that's not necessarily, I think, centered in Baton Rouge, but as a representative of this district, what sort of things would you be looking to do in Baton Rouge to reassure citizens that they're safe and that they don't have to be...
I guess trains aren't my specialty, but let me say that the first thing I would do is educate myself on the whole issue. Now, last night we heard a very interesting proposal that's something that is going to be tried in Metairie, and that is an app on your phone that allows you to know when trains are coming and when they're not, so that you're not sitting at a train station. So I think that innovative programs that can start and be funded in Baton Rouge can start here. And then the Department of Transportation owns most of this, so we would have to partner with the federal agencies and the federal government and our representatives basically to make sure that we are safe and to make sure we know what is passing through Louisiana and New Orleans in particular, and Metairie too, all of our local areas. I mean, that should be a given, that we are aware of what's going through our city so that we can remain safe and protect ourselves. So I would just, I would educate myself on the situation and then tackle it as we need it, but it's an issue that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not an engineer on a train or anything, but I do know the inconvenience that it does provide. Look, there's a train that parks right there in my neighborhood that disconnects me from City Park, one of the great joys of this city, and it stops either early in the mornings or late in the afternoons when I decide to try and go a jog and try to get to City Park. I shouldn't be doing this, but I crawl under the train sometimes, or if I'm looking up. I know, but whatever. You do what you got to do to stay in shape. So, one of the issues that I have with trains in the state of Louisiana right now is that there's been talk, and you'll probably hear a lot of this on the state level, about trying to create a train that runs from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. It's about a $300 million close, and then two. And I think this speaks to the larger point that we're talking about here this evening, which is getting goods and services to and from. I think with the automation of vehicles that we're seeing right now, there are autonomous vehicles that will begin to come online in the next 20 and 30 years, if not sooner, that will be able to have the capacity to move goods and services much more safely, much more reliably. I think that's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at investing in future technologies, 21st century technologies, not 19th century technologies. And so that's one of the areas that I would like to explore as it relates to rail.
So District 94 crosses two of the most populous parishes in the state. Obviously, transportation, those sort of issues that we've talked about are very important to both parishes. How much do you know about the capital outlay budget process, and what would you do to make sure that this region is getting its proper share of transportation infrastructure projects, improvements, increases?
Yeah, so look, the capital outlay process, obviously, it's dense in the way that it works. I'll say this much. I would like to, at the first level, get appointed to the Ways and Means Committee, which was actually, I know our current representative just walked in. It was a committee that she was actually appointed to and stepped down from. That comes with it certain infrastructure dollars for our district. That's something I would look to do. I fundamentally believe that we need to have leadership to step up in those processes and start to deliver funds and things for our city and our state. So at the end of the day, having both Jefferson Parish with their hand out and New Orleans with their hand out, I think is a good thing because we can all work together. I think a lot of those dollars need to be focused on drainage, on infrastructure, especially with the 17th Street Canal in Lakeview, and ensuring that's properly look. And I fundamentally disagree once again with the incumbent on this one. She ran on Streets and Crime, 4 years ago, and I ask you to this day, are your streets any better? Can you drive down any of the roads or see any of the infrastructure projects in this city based off the promises from 4 years ago? And I think we need to start holding our elected officials accountable.
So I would agree with that, and we need to also, like the Department of Transportation funds much of our infrastructure, our roads and bridges. So we really need to get federal grants and federal monies down here to really talk about the importance of transportation here in New Orleans as the most populous city in the state, and make sure that we are coordinating with everybody to bring money back to New Orleans and Jefferson Parish to get the infrastructure that we need in transportation.
Has been alluded, Representative Hilferty is here with us, so if you want to take your seat. And we are currently talking about transportation and infrastructure. Close this out, and that is, we'll go ahead and start with you, that should we look at increasing the gas tax or doing something else to help catch up with deferred maintenance on roads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects?
Yeah, let me talk about, I do want to address infrastructure because the Orleans delegation in 2017, I ran two pieces of legislation that were then rerun in 2019 to provide recurring funding for infrastructure in Orleans Parish, set of bills that we ran in 2019. This will provide about $26 million annually in recurring revenue for infrastructure in Orleans Parish as a part of, and this is generally tourism dollars that are coming back to Orleans for infrastructure, in addition to $49 million of one-time funding. That was a huge win for our city, and it represents dollars and infrastructure coming back to our city. I want to also address the capital outlay process. We have actually been very successful in getting capital outlay dollars to our city, which I know there's been some question about how it works. The capital outlay process, you have to stay in the bill year after year and maintain your funding. And I've worked very closely on that. We also got a maintenance building for City Park. I'm guessing that means stop. So we have been successful, and I think Kirk has been told, and it used to be the process that certain members of appropriations and capital outlay would get a certain amount for their district. That has not happened in.
Basically came out and said that they are in no way, sound economic policies. In 2017, she ran those bills. Matter of fact, I think they pulled them in committee immediately because there was not even support even in committee for those bills. Never even made it to the House floor, either of them. A year goes by, nothing. 2 years goes by, somebody puts up a different bill called the Fair Share Bill, runs with it. Our representative didn't testify in committee on those bills, but then somehow gets to claim success because she's part of the Orleans delegation. That's not legal. Did, and quite frankly, I think is a misrepresentation of what has been done. Now, to the original question was
whether you increase the gas tax or what other things to do to catch up with deferred maintenance.
And this is a very important point. No, I am not in favor of increasing the gas tax because quite frankly, right now there's too much being funded out of that gas tax that does not need to be funded. Until we can start removing things like DOTD and state police and things like that are being funded out of this gas tax and truly just for shovel-ready projects, I am not in favor of increasing that gas tax. Now, and plus, it disproportionately affects the poorest amongst us, people just trying to get to and from work.
I'm sorry. Well, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The gas tax. So right now, gas is at an all-time low, and it has account for inflation. It's really low. It hasn't risen in years. And one way that we can maintain our roads and bridges and infrastructure is to a modest increase, small to modest increase in the gas tax. But it has to be really dedicated to roads and infrastructure. If we don't do that, we don't have a methodology, basically, to keep up with our roads. So I would not be against a gas tax. I would really like to consider it to make sure that, I mean, we have to do something to maintain it, to have a regular maintenance schedule for our roads, and we have to do something. We don't have anything in place right now. So I would be all for studying that, and if it seems feasible, but I agree that we can't be stealing from the fund to fund other things. We really need to dedicate those funds. If not, then it's for naught. So we have to be very disciplined about it.
About 30 seconds if you want to respond to what Kirk Williamson said.
Okay, let me be straight with you. I ran those two bills. That summer, then candidate Cantrell called me and asked about the mechanism of those bills. I worked closely with the Orleans delegation on running those bills and making sure that we got our infrastructure dollars to Orleans Parish. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And just to let you know, we also have these little yellow flags, and so like Tim and I were just talking about, if someone mentions you specifically, you can rebut. You don't have to throw the flag. But if someone just says something and you're just like, well, I don't really like that, you can throw the flag one time, and then you get 1 minute to respond to whatever it is. All right. Anyway, so I'm gonna just go ahead with you. All right, bipartisan criminal justice system reforms move Louisiana from the #1 most incarcerated state to the #2 most incarcerated state. Small steps. What would your priorities be towards continued criminal justice reform, particularly in the area of sentencing reform? And I'll start with you. We'll just go around and around to make it fair.
I think the utmost priority when we talk about criminal justice reform is making sure that our people are safe and that we're getting the best outcomes for our residents. That has always been my stance on criminal justice reform. I've worked closely with our law enforcement community as well as our DAs to understand the impacts of the bills. I think there was a large package that was presented, I believe it was in 2017 when many of these came down. So I think we need to always look at what we're doing, how are other states doing it, and looking at how those impacts will ultimately affect our communities.
So I'm a big believer in the Constitution of the United States of America, and in it you are guaranteed a right to a free and speedy trial. Right now, tonight, there are people sitting in OPP who have been sitting there for weeks, if not months, without being able to have access to representation in the courtroom, and they are being denied justice. I fundamentally believe that this is one of the biggest wrongs that this governor has done in the last 4 years, is not fully funding our public defender's offices. Right now, we're literally having to ask lawyers who are not in any way capable of defending people in criminal court systems to defend what's wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a priority that we must focus on, because quite frankly, if we take a father or a wife out of a household for weeks, if not months on end, while they just await a trial, you're taking away their economic ability to help provide for that family, to provide care for their children, to do so many other things that we need to be focusing on. And so I fundamentally believe that that should be a priority as part of this criminal justice reform package moving forward.
I agree with that, Kirk. This is a huge problem for us. Louisiana incarcerates more people for nonviolent crimes than any other state. This cost us millions of dollars. In addition, it destroys communities, it destroys families, because the person is out of commission, they can't support their family. So it is what we do to incarcerated people, and I'm talking non-violent crimes, is not smart. So what we really need to do is focus on rehabilitation, our recidivism rates, because re-entry is so difficult for our people that are incarcerated. So we really have to focus on re-entry, making sure that people have a way to get a job and enter the job market and civil society again, so that they don't go back to jail or prison. The other thing, in addition to the public defender's office, is that we basically have a debtor's jail system right now. If you can't pay bail, and if you can't pay the fines, and they just keep adding up and adding, you will be in jail, not for the original crime that you committed, but for all the fees that you can't pay. So we have just created this system where we keep poor people in jail, and it doesn't make any sense, and then we are paying taxpayers to keep them in jail. So it does nobody any good. We really need this reform, and I will fight for this because this is really important to our communities and our neighborhoods, and it just destroys the fabric of our society. We have to change the incarceration system in this state.
All right, thank you. I'll start with Kirk with this next one. How does the legislature ensure representation through protecting the right to vote? And can we talk a little bit about the impact of 2020 census-based redistricting?
Yeah, so we'll agree on, but we were blessed, I think, at District 94 to have a district that is, basically across the board, well represented, 30% Democrat, 40% Republican, 30% independent, other type things. And it's truly, I think, a structure, a plan for the rest of this state. Look, people need to have access to their government. In 2020, there will be redistricting. I would hope to be on, I think it's House Government Relations or one of the committee that helps with redistricting. And I want to see that we districts that make sense, that allow people, neighbors, to be able to vote in the same precincts, that are fair and equitable to both Democrats and Republicans, that we're not just drawing them to support one group over another, that they're fair and people have access to their government.
Yes, I was Tammy and then.
Okay.
Okay, so I think, so 2020 we're having the census, 2021 we will redistrict based on the census. I sincerely believe that we need an independent commission to redistrict because what we've had in the past is politicians basically drawing the districts so that they can be reelected. And we see that at the federal level all over the place. At the state level, we kind of see that too. And this district may and look like 30-30-30, and that's only because of the changes in the registration and demographics. But really, our district, we had one person, Pepe Bruno, who was in this, who owned our district since 1976, and until there were term limits in 2007, he was going to get elected. That our district isn't drawn, for a politician is false. But we need fair district. It's the only way we can maintain our democracy. This is a threat to our democracy when people's votes don't count. So I'm for an independent commission to redraw the districts in 2021.
I'll point out the district is different from, the district is actually a combination of two districts. And so I do think that the district we have right now, it is contiguous and it runs along the lakefront. And I'll say this, House and Governmental Affairs is the committee on the House side that will redraw the districts. What I think is really important and fundamental is making sure that neighborhoods stay together. I don't think it's right that Mid-City intersects with 4 different representatives. I came to your last crime prevention district meeting. I was the only representative there, and that's fine. Look, not everyone's going to be at every meeting, but I think it makes sense when you have one neighborhoods. We have an incredibly strong fabric of neighborhoods in Orleans Parish, and it's a blessing that we have that. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Lakeview has one senator, one representative, and Lake Terrace and Lake Shore and Lake Vista, and Mid-City, we do see that segmentation. So I think really making sure that geographically and from a neighborhood perspective, those neighborhoods are maintained is important.
Thank you. Just to let you guys know, we have 2 more questions left, and then after that, they'll do their closing remarks. This one, I'll start with Tammy. How does are protected, including people of color and the LGBTQIA community?
Okay, just in civil rights in general?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that we really have to, particularly, we start with the LGBTQ community, we have to make sure that we don't allow laws to be passed that actually allows discrimination against particular people. So we have to do this, and we have to be protective of our most vulnerable people, and LGBTQ people are very vulnerable. They're victims of crime very often, and discrimination, housing discrimination, job discrimination, you name it. And so we need to protect that population of people. The same thing with people of color. We need to make sure, we still have these wage gaps, and people are discriminated on the job because of their race, and housing discrimination and redlining, all of this. We have to make sure that we are doing the right thing and making sure that we passed the criminal justice law last year.
Earlier, the last time the Louisiana Constitution was written was in 1974. At that convention, you basically had, I think it was 95% were white males. The reason why we had such disproportionate representation in our state right now is that we're literally living under the laws of a broken system of 1974. I am fully for hosting a constitutional convention that will bring our state to the modern era, that would elect delegates to be representative of truly who we are, this fabric, this gumbo that we are as the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans. I think you would have to be living under the system that was created by everybody change the way that we are moving in this state, and that is a wonderful way to move forward and have a better representation, a better constitution for our citizens.
I know Kirk mentioned a constitutional convention. I voted for it, I've supported it. Our Constitution has gotten away from being a set of guiding principles like our US Constitution is, and in some portions it reads like a tax code in other portions, but there are some basic rights that are currently in that Constitution that we would certainly want to preserve. Look, we need a Louisiana where everyone, this comes back to me personally, a huge passion of mine over the past 4 years in the legislature has been early childhood education. We need a Louisiana where our youngest citizens start off on the right foot and they're able to access that education and then move forward in the kindergarten K through 12 system well prepared so that they can then go off and get the jobs and live the life and become productive citizens and start that cycle over again. So I am fully for giving every Louisiana citizen their rights so that they can go and make our state even better.
Okay, how can the legislature protect the rights of law-abiding gun owners while keeping guns out of the hands of individuals who have been disqualified from ownership, such as individuals convicted of domestic violence?
Sure. I know my former seatmate, now Councilwoman Helena Moreno, had passed a set of bills on domestic violence prior to me entering the legislature, and then fortified some of that to make sure that somebody who has been convicted of domestic violence, so we are keeping, like you said, out of what we want to see is if you have broken the law, we certainly need to make sure that there is a mechanism to make sure that you cannot then go out and harm someone. So I'm supportive of that. I had to see the details of a proposal, certainly, to be able to speak more fully on it, but we obviously want to make sure we're protecting our citizens while also protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens.
Yeah. So I do believe that you, as a citizen, have the right to defend yourself. I always go back to the idea of Katrina. Because at that point, there was no police force. You should have the ability to defend yourself, your property, your family, in the case of dire need. As a matter of fact, even just without that catastrophe, you look at the response rate right now of NOPD, if you call the police right now, you're lucky if they get there in 10 minutes. In many cases, it could be a lot longer. I can guarantee you, as somebody who's been in the military, who has been trained in these types of things, a fight lasts less than 10 minutes, a minute or two, that's it. I fundamentally believe that everybody in this country has the right to defend themselves, and that's what speaks to the right of the Second Amendment. I do believe in the Second Amendment, because I look at it from fundamentally as a protection force. 99.9% of the people in this country, if not more, are law-abiding, good people who just wanted to be able to defend themselves against the 0.01% of people who want to cause harm to everybody else. And so that's just where I'm at on the Second Amendment. I do support it.
Well, yeah, I support the Second Amendment. I was in the military for 38 years, so I'm very familiar with weapons. I was law enforcement and security before I became a psychologist. So, but the thing is, what's it going to take to protect us from that one? That for anybody who wants to buy, 1% of people in this country, in this state, want universal background checks. 9% of people or 80% of people want red flag laws, so that if a family, if a, an employer notices something about an individual, or that individual says, I'm not right, I can't really have a gun right now, we can't even get that passed. We need red flag laws to basically say, if somebody is not right, then they can go to a magistrate and basically have an evaluation and have their gun held until they become right again. I did this as a military officer, as a psychologist, where I evaluated people to be able to carry weapons and to perform their jobs. We can do this in Louisiana and the rest of the country too. So we need that.
So I will politely disagree on this. Look, I think that if an employer calls somebody and says, I think that this person's rights need to be taken away from them, that's wrong. Look, at the end of the day, the majority of the people who cause the violence in this country are getting those weapons illegally anyway. And whether we decide to give away our ability to protect ourselves in the name of making sure that bad people don't have guns. Bad people are going to have guns, ladies and gentlemen. They just are. They're in our society. I want the ability to protect myself against them. And the idea.
Do you have an AR-15?
Sir, actually I do. Yes, sir. And at the end of the day, yes, my father does. We have it on our land. And at the end of the day,
have an AR-15?
you have the right to buy an AR-15. Yes, sir. You sure do. I believe you have that right. You do. And by us pretending somehow that we're going to make ourselves safer by taking away rights of other citizens is just not acceptable to me. I fundamentally believe that you have the right to protect. And that's just where I stand on those issues. You have the right to protect yourself. And I think everybody does. Thank you. Do I get a rebuttal off of that? Or?
No, I think you addressed it. Or is there something else? Okay. So we are going to go to closing statements, and we'll start with Stephanie. But before we do that, I have a quick section that I hope gets through. It's a show of hands, so you don't have to worry about the microphone. To touch on some subjects fairly quickly. I realize we lose some nuance, but we do get to cover a lot of ground quickly. So my first question is a multiple choice question, and that has to do with the all charter school system in New Orleans. And I want to ask you about show of hands whether you think it was a success, a failure, or too soon to tell. So how many think that it's been a success? How many think it's been a failure? Too soon to tell, or something else?
Look at the all charter system. So we have the traditional public schools and the charter schools. So
right, all of New Orleans is all charter schools. And that's just a question about whether it's been.
I think it's too soon to tell because we have had some.
Yeah, look at us doing multiple choice, Tim. Come on, I'm joking.
Public to public school. What are you going to do? I mean,
let me say this. What I do, I sit on the House Education Committee, so I do see a lot of the charter laws that come through the House Education Committee. What I think is important about our charter schools is that, and we do have good charter law in Louisiana, is that if your school fails, you lose that charter. So you cannot fail generations of children. Are they perfect? No. I think it's 3 consecutive years, you lose your charter. I understand that that's incredibly disruptive to a parent. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I can imagine if somebody said tomorrow your child's school is shutting down, that would be very disruptive. But I also understand the value in that school not continuing on without those checks and balances in place.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is an important topic. You mind if we all just kind of jump in?
Yeah.
Look, I think if you look at the data and the statistics since Katrina, since this is gone, I mean, too early to tell. I think that ship has already sailed. It's been 15 years now since these Katrina, and you can tell that we have made significant leaps and bounds in every major statistic, whether that be in class attendance, whether that be in test taking, whether that be in graduation rates, whether that be in teen pregnancies, smoking, things of this nature. They have provided very good benefits to our society. As a matter of fact, I'm actually in favor of a program called ESA, that's Educational Savings Accounts, what they're doing in Arizona right now, where essentially they've created a public-private partnerships that allow industry like Ochsner or Valero refine kids their talents, whether that be mechanical engineering, whether that be biomedical sciences. We've created a one-size-fits-all educational system in the state of Louisiana that is not working. And I think that we need to start to create public-private partnerships and increase the amount of choice that you have on where you want to educate your child.
Okay, so I guess I kind of started all of this, but basically, we've had some really significant issues with the charter schools, especially like the example of Kennedy, where we had kids graduating. And so they're graduating, getting ready to go to college, and guess what? They don't have enough credits. They didn't really graduate, and they couldn't go to college. So this is devastating to them, and we really have to do better than that. And so I think a fundamental oversight of all of the charter schools under the Orleans Parish School Board is very important. As far as education is concerned, we have to really invest in our education. We have an incumbent that voted to yank $39 million from the Bessie School, the budget that they handed down to the legislature. So, you know, we can't have that. We really need to invest in our schools. I agree that we need to in our schools on a regular basis, and if we don't have oversight, then we are still rated. We have had improvements, but we're still rated 46th in K through 12, and I think 50th in TOPS. And our incumbent also voted in 2018 to yank like $58 million from the TOPS budget too. So, you know, we can talk about being pro-education, but you really have to walk the walk as well. So.
And I was going to keep this really simple, but the incumbent was mentioned. Do you want to? You have 30 seconds.
I don't have to use a flag. I'm keeping my flag. Okay, let me be very clear. What we did in the House Education Committee was ask Bessie to reconsider the additional funding, and we put it back to them. There was no vote taken yes or no on that. There was concern that there was not the money in the budget, and I did vote to increase the MFP by $39 million. So that is factually incorrect.
Okay, so these answers will be really quick. These are just yes or no. Would you support repealing the death penalty? Would you support outlawing or restricting the use of solitary confinement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, this is, yeah, yes or no. Would you support outlawing or greatly restricting the use of solitary confinement as punishment?
I'd have to hear more about the specific proposal.
Who would vote for a $15 minimum wage?
Stephanie, answer the question on the death penalty.
The death penalty, say, you said repealing it?
Yeah, would you vote to repeal death penalty? Okay. $15 minimum wage for most workers. Use. Calling the state constitutional convention to rewrite the 1974 Constitution. Yes or no?
On the other issues, the $15 for New Orleans area, I would support that. But we would have to do something to help employers who would be charged with getting that. So,
right.
Yeah.
I was saying we're going to lose some nuance in the yes or no's.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Try to
trying to do.
nuance.
Yeah. I just feel like on most of these are really
We need to consider that, and we need to consider regulating that and getting tax revenue for that, because we could really use it. And because we have discriminatory laws about who goes to jail for the use of marijuana. So we need to decriminalize, we need to regulate, we need to tax and benefit from that.
Okay. Closing statements. You have 2 minutes each. We'll start with Stephanie and move down. Did you have something, Kirk?
Well, I just want to say, I guess to answer, just make sure we're all answering the question. I think it's only fair. So as far as $15 minimum wage, no. As far as recreational use of marijuana, I would like to see it go before a state referendum and let the people decide. I think it's only fair. And as far as the Constitutional Convention, no surprise here, I'm absolutely in favor of that. So, yeah, thank you.
$15 minimum wage, no. I think a parish by parish referendum on legalization of marijuana is something we should consider. And what's the last thing on that?
Constitutional Convention.
Yes.
And I didn't answer the Constitutional Convention, but yes.
Okay. Great.
First of all, it's been my honor to serve, I'm guessing everyone in here lives in District 94, you for the past 4 years. Two of the things that I do want to mention, because I didn't get to discuss as much, were early education and maternal mortality. These are 2 things that I've been very passionate about over the past 4 years. Early education, we were successful in dedicating $20 million towards early education this past year. This goes toward our youngest learners, specifically 0 to 3. Right now, we have an almost fully funded in-need 4-year-old, pre-K 4, and a 3-year-old. I really think where we're losing these children when they get into the kindergarten grade is that they're coming in at a potentially a few years behind. It's very hard to make that up during a school year. Another thing is maternal mortality. We have one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in the country. I'm committed to looking at this issue and understanding how we can advance it. I'm on the Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies Task Force. I passed that legislation, bipartisan passed, and worked with the governor's office in passing that as we look at ways we can affect the disparity in others, as well as looking at how we hopefully decrease those maternal mortality statistics. We have been successful in getting infrastructure funding. Does that occur overnight? No. We will see more dollars coming to Orleans Parish, and we do have state oversight in how those dollars are spent, which I think is incredibly important, that at the state level we can monitor and make sure that those dollars are effectively deployed in Orleans Parish for our infrastructure. There have been many things that we have seen. I think I'm committed. I attend the neighborhood meetings because I think that is where most of the work of the neighborhood happens. Whether that is Lakeview, Mid-City, Whitney, Cecile, Bucktown, I'm at those meetings listening to the concerns of the citizens. Again, it has been my absolute honor to serve you, and I thank you and I ask you for your vote.
Look, I just want to start off by thanking everybody for having this forum. I got to say, this is refreshing to be able to get to debate one another. Most of the forums that we go to, we don't, it's just, we get to sit up there and we'll kind of introduce ourselves and ask some independent questions. And as it's been shown tonight, that can always be tough, right? Both on us here at this table who may disagree with one another, and also, just as a neighborhood, because quite frankly, we all don't agree on everything, but I think we can agree on a lot of things. Right now, I fundamentally believe that we should not be taxing the poorest people in this state to pay for the largest budgets in our state's history. I don't think that we should be allowing our car insurance rates to reach the highest in the nation that affects hardworking men and women, much like my single mother. I don't know how she did it growing up. When I was growing up, I don't know how she did it. And I look at that today and say, I don't know how mothers and fathers and hardworking men and women are even getting to and from work because they can't even afford car insurance. These are things that we need to start talking about and getting more creative on addressing. So, I fundamentally believe that we need to go into a different direction. I'm glad that Stephanie has done what she's done in the last several years, but it has not been effective. That doesn't mean we have to dislike one another, but that does mean that we need to go in a different direction. And I would offer my candidacy to you this evening for you to consider, and I would greatly appreciate your vote come October 12th. My name is Kirk Williamson. I'll be number 116 on the ballot. So number 116 on the ballot, number 1 in your heart. I appreciate you.
15 on the ballot, and so I will be asking for your vote too. I am really just so passionate about our state and our city, and I want to go up there and provide leadership and fight ferociously for our district and our state. So my 3 buckets, to reiterate, are our local issues, our infrastructure, flooding, roads and bridges, our insurance rates, and our taxes. Then we have our social issues, our healthcare system, our education system, criminal justice, this nature, the raising the minimum wage, local control, all of those things that concern us. And then we have threats to our democracy, which are real, and that is redistricting must be done fair by an independent commission. We must make sure everybody has an opportunity to vote, and we must, and I'm the only one who is up here fighting for our environment, making sure that we address the issue of coastal erosion, global warming, and sea level rise, because that will get us before anything else. So I'm here to fight for our voice in Baton Rouge to address those one after the other, and to be a voice in all of those committee meetings and not let up until we get some recognition of these issues in Baton Rouge, and I will go and fight for you. So Tammy Savoie, 115 on the ballot. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I agree with Kirk. This is not like any other forum we've been to, and I really appreciate the moderators and the audience for being here. Thank you, and my opponents. Thank you.
So we want to thank the candidates. So everybody, it's not an easy thing to put yourself out there. Not everybody up there is going to get elected. Only one of them perhaps will. And so it's a lot of hard work. And I can tell you from being a couple of these that I am so gratified at the quality of candidates. I think District 94 should feel blessed that you have a choice. You also saw what's been pointed out, some really strong disagreements, passionate, but it's done in a respectful way, which I am so grateful to see after seeing things happening more nationally. I also want to thank the neighborhood associations, and this is really where democracy happens. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. A reminder that this will be posted on Mid-City Messenger. There's a video there, will be a video there, and also a breakdown. So again, you can share this with people. A reminder that early voting starts Saturday. I think, if somebody wants to correct me, that Monday is the last day to get an absentee ballot, but it's coming up soon, so check the Secretary of State's website. October 12th, Saturday, it will be a beautiful morning. Everybody should get out and take everybody they can find to the polls. And if nobody has